Welcome, everybody. I see everybody coming in, and we'll get started in just a second. We are also going to try streaming this event live on our Facebook page today, so we'll see how that goes. And I'm just finishing setting that up, and then we'll get started. So welcome, everybody. We're so glad you could join us for our January virtual Lunch and Learn. And we're going to learn more today about the Riverfront Parks Now initiative here in Jacksonville. I just wanted to remind everyone that we're going to collect questions and comments in the chat, and then at the end, our presenters will respond to those. Everyone's microphone should stay off during the presentation. We are delighted to have Nancy Powell and Jimmy Orth with us today to talk about the Riverfront Parks Now. Nancy Powell, if I could introduce her, joined Scenic Jacksonville in February 2020 as its first executive director, and in this new position, she is responsible for helping the organization establish the operations, membership, advocacy, and outreach to ensure the organization fulfills its mission over the long term. She recently completed a 2-year term as board chair of the Riverside Avondale Preservation Society and serves on a number of other community committees in Jacksonville. Her professional career included roles as a consultant and VP of operations for Stop at Nothing, a leadership consulting firm, and earlier as a marketing executive at American Express, AT&T, and Media One. She holds an undergraduate degree from Brown University and an MBA from the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. Also with us is Jimmy Orth, a native of Jacksonville who joined the St. John's Riverkeeper as its executive director in 2004. He maintains overall responsibility for budgeting, staffing, program development, fundraising, and public relations. Jimmy's been involved in environmental policy and advocacy issues in Northeast Florida for more than 25 years. He received his undergraduate degree in marketing from Florida State University and his master's degree in public administration from UNF. So welcome, and we look forward to hearing about your initiative.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen here. Thank you so much for taking the time today to hear our presentation. We've been, making the rounds of different organizations, and really are so excited to talk to you all who have such an important role. And I know we could learn a lot from you as to how to do advocacy, which you've done so well. And what an important day too, as far as doing this. But Riverfront Parks Now is an outgrowth of conversations that started about a year ago around the resiliency issues. Some of you all may know that there's a separate coalition called Resilient Jacks, about 10 organizations that has come together to support the City of Jacksonville's Committee on Resiliency, now led by Randy DeFore. It had started with Councilman Carlucci. And we started talking amongst ourselves kind of after those meetings, just informally about resiliency, how do we protect our downtown, looking at the impact of Irma on our downtown, which nobody had ever really, I think, envisioned what was going to happen at the, across the shores of the downtown area, both on the south and the north bank. And so, so this was really the, so then Jimmy and I kind of, as the staff members of our organization started researching other cities. And we also have and like you all, have traveled to many other cities and have been impressed with the downtown areas of other cities. And we kept saying, well, look at what's happening here, look at what's happening here. And what we found is that this idea of riverfront parks, major riverfront parks, can provide so many different benefits. And including resiliency, and it can be co-benefits. And so the organization, it's not really a formal organization. Hold on a second. How am I going to do this? How do I trim? Oh, there we go. We're not a separate nonprofit. We are a coalition of different nonprofits organizations: Scenic Jacksonville, the Late Bloomers Club, the Garden Club, the Riverkeeper, Greenscape, Sierra Club, Memorial Park Association, and the Jacksonville Urban League. And we are open to others joining. This is not we want to be inclusive. And what we found is that this idea of coalitions, and I think Resilient Jacks has found this also, is really a powerful concept. We get audiences, and we're listened to in a different way than if it was just one organization talking. And so, one of the things we've done is we've attended a lot of the Downtown Investment Authority meetings looking at downtown, and we came across this map, which we recreated. And of course, a year ago, the landing had just come down, the courthouse had come down, and we saw this map, which was very illustrative. So this is a map of all the undeveloped properties, city-owned, in the downtown area, South and North Bank, including the two Riverwalks, okay, which are not really development parcels. But you can see here, as on the North Bank, about 50% of the shoreline is city-owned. And the number 6 is the Shipyards property. The number 7 is Metropolitan Park. And of course, last year in July, the rights to the Shipyards, which had been owned by Iguana, the Shad Khan company, those expired. And so there is no encumbrances on these properties right now, except for number 5 is the courthouse, and that there's a developer who is supposed to do something on that property, but nothing's happened yet. So we, in most cities, when they're looking at riverfront and public spaces, they have to go purchase the land. And we have this land right here available to us. And we should be the stewards of this land. So this is a picture of the current shipyards today. You can see that the Hart Bridge has come down. This is the exact state of the property as we speak. And what we envision is a connected network of active parks and extensive green space to include a signature park along the downtown riverfront. We wanted to be inclusive, to be a gathering space for the community. We think that it will spur economic development around these properties and create a more resilient riverfront. The picture here is the current Metropolitan Park property, which, as you can see, has mature trees. It has some structures on it. It has a marina. It really has good bones, even though it's been neglected now for over a decade. So we looked at other cities, and through our travels and through our research, I couldn't help but start with Chicago, because I am from Chicago area and spent a lot of time going downtown in the 80s when I was a teenager. But Chicago today is even better than it ever has been. But this front lawn, Grant Park, I'm sure many of you have been here, is a connected series. It's not just it's a series of parks, and it's in a constant state of change and renewal. I think that cities have reinvested in their public spaces. I can tell you Grant Park was not like it is today when I was in high school and coming down to it, even though it had a lot of the elements. Of course, there's Millennial Park in the corner up here, which is the cornerstone and a very popular place. The Pritzker Pavilion has the orchestra playing. Over here is Maggie Daley Park. It's a newer kids park, which is amazing. And then south of here is Museum Campus, is Northerly Island. It keeps extending. And the other, critical part here is if you look at the real estate here, it's very obvious that the most valuable real estate is around this park, across Michigan Avenue, across the street, and they get not only the lakefront view, but the park benefit as well. So it creates more value inland than it would be if these buildings had been on the right up to the edge. And the other thing is that this is connected, and connection is a key word here, to 18 miles of lakefront beaches and parks along, Lake Michigan. And in the past decade, they've created the Chicago Riverwalk, which was nothing when I was growing up. It was Wacker Drive underneath these buildings in a scary place. But now it's a vibrant section. Many sections of the Riverwalk are being built in phases. It's not built all at one time. What you're looking at here is what they call the jetty section, which is a floating wetlands and a place where people can learn about the river. But other blocks have kayak launches. Other blocks have, outdoor cafes and places to play. And so they've just found that it's been so successful, they continue building it. And but then we say, okay, well, we're not Chicago, we're not New York, but let's look at some mid-sized cities. And we found a ton of them. We don't even have all of them in this presentation, but Detroit is a great example. This is a 22-acre revitalized park, $50 million, that is expected to attract 3 million visitors annually. There's a sister park in Buffalo, New York, designed by Van Valkenburg also, and by the same, there's a benefactor who is behind this. And we'll talk a little bit about funding later on in the presentation. Louisville is another great example. This is an 85-acre park. They are adding 22 more acres because they found that it's been so successful. And there are some similarities here. You can see this is the same park in a different angle, but it's a major gathering place for people in Louisville. You can see the stadium behind it. It's the Yum Stadium, a basketball stadium. You can see a Hart Bridge type of highway and you can go underneath the highway to the city. So it's close by. And across this river is Indiana and Cumberland Park. There's a major park that's being built in Indiana, and they see this as a regional draw, as something that will be attractive to visitors as well as quality of life for the residents there. Memphis, Tennessee, my husband's from Memphis, and if anybody knows Memphis, they know that Mud Island is in the middle of the river here and is also a public space. But what Memphis wanted was a major public space that was closer connected to their downtown core. And this is a 30-acre park that's broken ground this past fall. And like many of the parks that are being built today, they're being built with themes and sections. It's not all one park, and they have different audiences and different needs. And so this one has a civic area, it has a community area, it has a habitat area where you can go through a tree walk. I can't wait to see what that is like, but there's like a walkway through the trees. And so this is another successful example. Brooklyn Bridge, we picked this one, even though it was New York, for two reasons. One is the creative adaptive reuse of these piers, which, you can look at our shipyards and see some similarities there. This is 85 acres stretching along the river. So it has a linear park alongside these piers, and it has this development here in the corner, which is on 10% of the land, but it provides funding for 90% of the park's operations. And so, when people say, we need development or parks, and it's an either or, we say, no, it doesn't have to be an either or, even though there are some issues, we feel about building too close to the riverfront for resiliency purposes, which we'll talk to a little bit more. In Cincinnati, this is the Smale Riverfront Park. It's a fabulous place. I've been here. It's very creative. The pictures, don't do it as much justice, but it's 32 acres. It's again along the riverfront. The bridge, I think, was built by the same, people who built our Main Street Bridge, or it looks similar to that. And here's another view of the same park. So they're not next to one stadium, but they've got two stadiums on either end. But you can see the stadiums are on the other side of the road, as well as this major development in between the two stadiums called the Banks. And even this one has public green space across the river also. So the Banks has development fees that help contribute to this public-private partnership that was formed for this park. Here's another view of their expanded Riverwalk area. And I'm going to turn it over to Jimmy because he's going to go through some of the more creative resiliency parks.
Thanks, Nancy. Well, I think the thing that, I hope you're kind of getting a sense for is that these parks are not, historically parks were looked at really primarily as just a source of recreation. But now I think cities are really recognize that there's multiple benefits that parks can provide. And we have to take that into consideration when we're evaluating the return on investment. Parks obviously provide health and wellness benefits, which we've seen, and particularly through COVID, it's become very apparent the importance of the outdoors. They're also, I think, the economic benefit, and I know Nancy touched on that, but it's so important to recognize that these cities are not just looking at parks as to provide access to the waterways or to the outdoors. They're really looking at them as economic tools and engines that they can actually use as incentives, frankly, for surrounding development, because it's proven in study after study that these parks increase adjacent property values, and they also are catalysts for surrounding development. I'll give you an example. There was a study done for in Pittsburgh, because they were looking at expanding parks. And they found that the return on investment for these parks in different cities was from 6-to-1 for the Atlanta Beltway to 40-to-1 for the Rose Kennedy Greenway in Boston. So you can see that's a huge return on investment as compared to some of the private developments that we've seen proposed, like Lot J, which I think has a 0.4-to-1 estimated return on investment. But one of the other really important, and this is critical nowadays, is that these cities are not only looking at them as economic engines, but also as a source of, or as a strategy to create more resilient communities. As we know from Hurricane Sandy, New York City is extremely vulnerable to storm surge and rising waters, just as Jacksonville is. And we saw that during Hurricane Irma. So what they've done is they're looking to parks like this one. This is a former industrial site that was originally, it was a floodplain and wetlands. Well, what they did is they essentially returned it back to some semblance of what it once was. And these wetlands help provide a buffer and help hold stormwater whenever there's a storm, but then obviously it provides great recreational opportunities for the community. And it's not just one park. In New York, they have a strategy that involves numerous parks throughout the waterfront. Probably in Boston.
Whoa. Sorry. Sorry, hold on.
Okay. The one that she's going to be getting to is Boston, which in Boston, they have a very comprehensive plan. As you can see, all of these greenish yellow areas, those are all areas that they've identified as parks, greenways, as areas where they can either enhance existing parks, they can retreat and remove existing infrastructure and create natural areas, or to build enhanced wetlands and things like that can create a buffer for the city. Because they too, just like New York, just like Jacksonville, just like all low-lying areas, extremely vulnerable to sea level rise. And they've seen that they can provide these multiple benefits. They can also provide these natural areas that can be a buffer for the city, but it also provides great opportunities for recreation and also can serve as a catalyst for the surrounding development. And then another way that parks are incorporating resiliency strategies this is a good example in Cumberland Park in Nashville. And there's an adjacent park called Riverfront Park. And I went to this a few years ago, and I had no idea at the time that I was standing on top of a cistern that captures 1 million gallons of stormwater. And that's what they're doing in a lot of these parks, is that they're incorporating stormwater capture strategies where they can help alleviate flooding, hold stormwater, help treat it before it's actually discharged out to the river. And so this park is a great example. That's a wonderful park. And this park and the adjacent park, since they've been built, there's been $1 billion in private investment within just 2 blocks of those parks since they were built. This is another interesting park. I love talking about Chattanooga because they're really they were the pioneers in looking to Riverfront and how you could create public access and green spaces along the waterfront to serve as a catalyst for redevelopment of their downtown. I like to talk about Chattanooga, one, because it's a fairly small city, but two, also it is a city that was once one of the most polluted cities in the country. Their air quality was one of the worst in the country in the 50s and 60s. And of course, then they were formerly an industrial city that was in serious decline economically. And so they really realized we have to reimagine who we are as a community and revitalize this community, and cannot look to the ways of the past. And so they said, we've got this wonderful riverfront. Let's create this network of parks and green spaces and river walks along both banks of the river, which they've done. This is in particular, this park is a newer park where they've actually taken I think it's about 23 acres, I want to say. Yeah, 23 acres. And they have incorporated, as you see these little weirs down here, they've incorporated wetlands that they've built on the site so that this can actually capture stormwater. So any of the stormwater that's running off of the adjacent commercial areas goes through this area and actually is filtered and treated, that water, before it's discharged out into the river. It also helps, obviously, with storm surge, so that when there's storm surge, it can capture and hold some of these waters and help prevent adjacent flooding. This is a neat park too. This Buffalo Bayou was essentially just a drainage ditch, and they recognized an opportunity here, which it also flooded quite frequently. And so they recognized that instead of working against nature, let's work with it. And they enhanced the creek. They expanded its capacity to hold stormwater, floodwaters, and turned this into a greenway of parks. I can't remember the length of it. It's really a long park that goes through the urban core of of Houston. And this park is designed to flood, though. And that's something that some of these parks, where I mentioned before, where we're working with nature as opposed to against it, like we've typically done, trying to harness nature. This one has built this park so that all of the infrastructure is designed to flood, so that once those floodwaters recede, it again can go back to being used for recreational purposes, and these buildings can just be cleaned up and function again as, I think there's a cafe in that building, for instance. And Smale, we talked about this earlier. It's a wonderful park, but it's also in Cincinnati, but it's also was built in a floodplain. And so they too recognize that we cannot prevent this park from flooding. We have to work with nature and anticipate that it will flood, and that we are having to deal with the impacts of sea level rise and increased potential for flooding. And so they've actually built this one as well, where actually some of the infrastructure here can be removed when it's anticipated that the Mississippi will flood, and moved up to higher ground and then reinstalled at a later time. And this too, as I mentioned, is designed so that once those floodwaters recede, it can go back to functioning as a park.
Okay, so just bringing it back to Florida, we wanted to look at a couple of our sister cities, Tampa and St. Pete in particular. Many of you probably have been there, but both of those cities have done an amazing job with their public spaces and their downtown revitalization, and those two things are related. We totally have seen that. So this is an 8-acre park along the Tampa Riverwalk. It is similar in location to our landing in that it's next to their performing arts center. It's kind of center of this of their two areas along the Tampa Riverwalk, and has a lot of events. So it's an economic as well as recreational area. One of the things I want to note is that Tampa built their Riverwalk way down to this one industrial area, and that area has now revitalized with armature works, and it keeps going. They also got a FDOT grant to expand their Riverwalk 22 miles, similar to our Emerald Trail. So they've got a grant to help fund that. In addition, across the river is this newly revitalized park. It's 25 acres. It's called the Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park. And, one of the tenets of these park developments, or the way that the parks have been created, is the community input. And we have been trying to, beat that drum with our city of having a shared vision of what does Jacksonville want? Well, they asked the Tampa people on this side of the river, what do they want in their parks? And this neighborhood wanted active parks. And when you say active parks in the park world, it means ball fields. So there are tennis courts, soccer fields, football fields. What you're looking at here is a performance boathouse. So that's another part of an active waterfront. They have areas, this little cove here is where you can learn how to paddleboard or kayak in a safe place without going out into the river. The structure, you can see the sloped roof. So it goes into a drainage into an area there. And it's also rented out for weddings. And it's a very popular place to have a wedding. In St. Petersburg, they have also done just amazing work on their park districts. And this is a 26-acre pier park. So the pier is a historic pier. This is the third time it's been rebuilt. They just finished it this July at the tune of $92 million. But they expect an $80 million annual impact of this. There are many active, there's several restaurants, there's a discovery center, there are within the park, this is a view of the wetland area. There's also major public art, which was privately financed, and it's a very experiential, it's hard to even show in pictures. But St. Pete, what impressed us about St. Pete is that they have a master plan. They published it. You can look on their website and find it pretty easily. And they are following the plan. But the Pier District is only one of 6 waterfront districts. They have a plan for each of the 6 districts. A lot of public space, a lot of activity, and St. Pete is booming with young people, where it used to be the place you go to die. So so there are other parks. We didn't have room in this presentation to do it, but Pittsburgh, Tulsa, Omaha, Buffalo, New York, Charleston, Lakeland, Florida, many other mid-sized cities, and we're not including the big ones here either, are investing in their urban waterfront parks. And we think the time is now for Jacksonville to do so. We also know, and we totally support the Emerald Trail project that is underway and is breaking ground this first quarter of 2021, which is really exciting. So we see that the Riverfront Parks perfectly complements the Emerald Trail. You can see that the roads kind of lead to downtown. And if you're downtown at a public place, you can rent a bike and hop on and explore the city in all of the connectivity that is allowed through the trails. And so they complement each other, and we really support this initiative. So back to the opportunity, the public land is ours. We can envision it in many different ways. This is one way to envision the shipyards. There's also, Metropolitan Park, and we can talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to touch quickly on the funding sources. So, there are, actually, I'm just going to go to this one. The funding is from diverse sources. There's public and private. There should be no one source that is really used. in these parks. And most of the parks have this public-private partnership. Grants, federal and state grants, we've seen that in a number of other cities where that's kind of the beginning. And we have kind of their brownfield, their environmental grants, their transportation grants. There are also tax increments districts, which our city has, and they usually use that money to fund developments, but they could easily fund parks. That would not be disallowed. And then, of course, development fees, if there are developments nearby, that there can be a deal made, as well as corporate and individual philanthropy. But as Jimmy said, the return, the financial impact in other cities, we have a document on our website that has a lot of this there if you wanted to look it up. But $6 to $40 return for every dollar invested in an urban waterfront park. And we know that this needs to be well maintained, well designed, top world class, right? We're not talking about the grassy knoll that's currently at the landing. We're talking about a really creative effort to make it so that it's a vibrant place that people want to go 365 days a year. Programming would be important, but it's also something that you could just go any day of the year. But you would also, so you're going to attract people downtown. That's the main thing that is going to help our downtown, is if there's more people there. But I also wanted to say that, this is an unknown right now, but mitigating the future cost of flooding and repairs, and the delays that happen, even if you have FEMA money, the bulkheads are still being repaired right now from 3 years ago. So there's a lot of lost economic value even if you don't have to pay for it yourself, which somebody has to pay for it. So, kind of coming back to our overall goal, we see this as a major gathering space. We see it also as a social equity piece, that people who don't have access to the river, if you don't have a country club that has riverfront access, or you don't own a boat, you can still enjoy the riverfront. And there's a lot of environmental justice and social justice aspects that go into this as well, and bringing a diverse community. If you look at anybody who goes to Memorial Park in Riverside, you can see that there's just all kinds of people that show up to that small park. It's only 6 acres. And it's a passive park. It's a beautiful park, well designed. That's a good example of design. But bringing people together is a really important piece. And so what it's going to take, that's always the question, is what is it going to take? We've been advocating for a riverfront master plan. To be honest, we could talk some more about that. This current administration is not very open to that. And yet that's what has done it in the past. The past success that we have had is because we've had the Better Jacksonville plan, a plan called Celebrating the River. There have been previous mayors who have created some plans. So we still think that this needs to happen, so that you're not developing in isolation. I mean, even the Lot J, it's an isolated project. And how does it connect to all these other things? Those are all good questions, but public involvement and creating the shared vision. And this is what we've seen in these other city examples, is really, what does Jacksonville want? What would make this uniquely Jacksonville? And let's not just import ideas from other cities, even though there's some really, really good ones. We might want aspects of it, but what does Jacksonville want to see? Leadership and prioritizing public access, support from the community. One thing I want to mention is that we are talking already about forming a conservancy, which would be an organization that would be the caretakers, kind of like Memorial Park Association does with that park, with a public-private partnership, because we know that it needs special attention to keep it up, to keep improving it, and make it safe, and all of those things. So what you can do is help us spread the word, help us advocate for a holistic plan with public input. Stay informed. There's a mailing list on our website, riverfrontparksnow.org, that you can sign up for. And, when we have call to action requests, participate in those. You guys are really good at that, I'm sure. But it makes a difference. We had a recent one about Metropolitan Park. It made an immediate impact as far as talking to the Downtown Investment Authority, or actually we copied the Downtown Investment Authority. We haven't heard the results yet from the National Park Service, and we can answer some questions about that. And then finally, you know, send us your feedback and ideas. We are, we have a number of things that we want to do still, as far as getting public input. We want to do a UNF poll. We want to have some more community meetings, especially in parts of town that we don't often maybe get to. We've gotten the support of Audrey Gibson, who is going to help us with setting some of those meetings up. And so I'm going to stop here and let you guys ask the questions that Jimmy and I can try to answer.
Great, thank you so much. So there have been some questions coming in the chat. I don't know if y'all are seeing those, or do you want me to feed them to you?
I have not looked at them yet.
So the first question is about parking, and this came in, you know, during the review of other examples. So how do they handle parking at some of those other parks?
Well, it starts with, you know, planning, good planning. And you have to plan for parking. And so this idea of a holistic plan, the best parking situations are shared parking. They're not single-use parking. We have a problem in that we have too much single-use parking, and then you have these parking lots that are not available to people after hours and when they're not being used. So the downtown area has a lot of parking garages, believe it or not, and yet everybody complains about not having parking. So some of the cities have been creative in Grant Park in Chicago. That was one of the first green roofs, because there is a huge parking garage underneath that park. It's unbelievable. And they're close to the lakefront. So, you know, engineering wise, you know, would that work in Jacksonville? I don't know. Cincinnati has underground park too. St. Louis does. Ideally, it's not on the riverfront. You don't use riverfront land for parking. So you have to figure out the, you know, and also not just parking, but transportation, right? Other forms of transportation.
Thank you.
One of the things that's interesting, there's a great park. I don't know that we could do something of this magnitude in Jacksonville, but in Tulsa, they have a park called the Gathering Place that is phenomenal. It's about over a $400 million park. Benefited from a major philanthropist that really paid for a good portion of it, but they really wanted it to be a spot for all people of Tulsa. They wanted it to be literally the gathering place. And they wanted it to be an equitable park that everybody has access to and can come to. And so what they have done is they have free shuttles that bring people from surrounding areas to the park. And so that if you don't have transportation, you could actually still access the park. It's just wonderful. And I would encourage you to look it up, because I think they had in their first year it was like almost 2 million visitors. And this is Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so, you know, I always say, if it can be done in Tulsa, it can be done here too, you know?
Thank you. So the next question is about whether any of these other cities have been able to measure impact of the park and waterfront changes, such as increased foot traffic or lower crime.
Yeah, there's a document on our website called the Economic Impact of Parks, and so a number of cities have done that kind of study. It's a similar kind of study as other types of things, which are you know, they're measuring visitors and the visitor impact. They're measuring there are some direct impact like rentals and things like that, so revenues from events and things like that. But there's also, you know, downtown, the extra spending that would come if you're going to the park and you're going to a restaurant, you're going to the park and you're staying in a hotel, you know, those types of things. And so we have not done that analysis yet, because we do not yet have a park land to design. I mean, that's one of the things we would like to see. And we kind of think that more is better, because of the resiliency component, mostly that the riverfront should be reserved for the public, and that behind Bay Street, behind Water Street, there's plenty of opportunity for infill, and we would encourage that. That's why we haven't, conceptually, we haven't opposed Lot J, because conceptually having building there, whether it's a good thing for the taxpayers is kind of a separate question. But the idea of building infill is not there. But yes, we think, and we also think that it will attract other developments, right? If you can have a development not require incentives or as many incentives, that's an economic benefit. It's a little bit indirect, but if that would be, people in Chattanooga and Nashville are not getting the same kinds of incentives that Jacksonville is, because they have a more attractive downtown that developers want to be at. Right now, we have to beg developers to come. And
yeah, a lot of this, I mean, it's well documented, because a lot of other cities, when they've looked at redeveloping their waterfronts, they obviously do these type of analysis, the economic study before, but then also they want to measure the success afterwards. And I'll give you an example. In Detroit, when they looked at, after they've done some major investments in the Detroit riverfront, they found that 3 million visitors now annually enjoy the waterfront, and then they found that 90% of visits to the riverfront would not have taken place without the significant improvements. Same thing in Chattanooga. Their visitor spending has reached 1.16, this is Chattanooga, so I mean, I think it's demonstrated that it brings people to the waterfront, it brings people to downtowns if you do it right. It has to be iconic, it has to be something that people want to visit. If it is, it's not going to just benefit people downtown and attract people that want to live downtown and work downtown. It's going to attract people from other parts of the city, and potentially even other parts of the state and the country.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been to that park in Chattanooga. That's a great park. We have a few different questions in the chat that are somewhat related, so I'm going to try to pull them together. So the questions are about whether you all have, or anyone has approached, for example, Shad Khan and the Jumbo Shrimp owners to get them on board with this kind of development in the Stadium District, whether Lenny Curry and Shad Khan have been approached and what their response has been. So what conversations have there been to date?
So we started with the mayor. We tried to start with the mayor when we decided to. We put together this presentation. We wanted to go public with it. We ended up talking with Brian Hughes, and Brian brought in Iguana to talk about Iguana's plans. So Iguana would like us to be a part of their plans, and what we have been pretty insistent upon is that this needs to be a City of Jacksonville plan. This needs to be a publicly supported plan, and it shouldn't be a plan that is just designed behind closed doors and presented to the public for approval. And so we kind of backed off of that. And who was your other question? We have been working, really advocating at the Downtown Investment Authority with the board there and Lori Boyer. I think we've got some traction there. We also have some, a historical view that these properties need to be developed and need to be on the tax rolls. But Lori has been listening, and so we have some confidence that she wants to see some kind of park revitalized, whether it's what our vision is or not. And so, yes, we have also been working with the city council. As you know, they've been distracted with the JEA and the Lot J. And so we are going to be circling back with them. Shad Khan, of course, has presented plans for the riverfront. He wants a big part of that for a Four Seasons and for other developments. And so, but there's also this issue of Metropolitan Park, which cannot be just easily gotten out of. And we have disagreed with the way that they're trying to swap the lands. So we had a call to action in October about that, or November. So there's a lot to be done there. If the National Park Service does not approve a swap, then we don't know what Shad Khan will do. But he has a lot of power in this city.
And that ties nicely into follow-up. So I think you mentioned earlier, some of us might not be familiar with Iguana. Is that Shad Khan's development company? Okay.
Yes.
So Iguana is his development company. Someone else asked about the Downtown Investment Authority, and so that was great to get that update there. We've got a comment. As a boat owner, our family has enjoyed the river and ocean for years. We have a marina at Metro Park, but they would like to see more floating docks and access for the many boaters in our area. And I assume from the pictures we saw that would be part of your vision, developing more access points for kayakers and boaters and paddle boarders and all of that.
Yeah,
I think
and we
that's
also know
important.
we also
It's
know that
important.
the
Oh, I'm sorry,
kayaking.
Nancy.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think, that was our vision, is to make sure that it's what the public wants. I think that's critical to understand. Is we have ideas, all of us individuals. It's kind of interesting, our whole coalition. There's a variety of ideas of it. Everybody has a little bit different vision individually of what they'd like to see. But I think that's why it's so important that this is a public process, where the public is involved in helping to craft that vision, so that if that is what the public wants, they want more access for kayaking and paddleboarding and boating, then that should be part of the plan. And I think that's what we've seen in these other cities that has been so successful, is that it was a process where they engaged the community, involved them in developing a shared vision, because that's where you get the buy-in too from the community. And so I think that's really critical. I also want to make one point real quick that goes back to what we were talking about with Iguana, is I think it's important to realize too, what we envision is also, we're not talking about just one park. We look at the whole riverfront, both banks, as being, we need to have a plan so that all of this is integrated. And we have an opportunity here, just like in Chattanooga, where you have a network of parks and public spaces and civic and cultural attractions that can all be woven together, along with, of course, the Emerald Trail. I mean, think about what we could have if you have all of this public space along the waterfront on both banks and access, and then you have the Emerald Trail, which reaches out into the surrounding neighborhoods. I mean, this could be something that is no other city really has, frankly.
Yeah, really exciting vision. And I think, many of our members are very involved with lots of other organizations in the community. So we've got a question that probably many of us will be interested in hearing the answer to. What groups can join, and how, if I'm a member of a community organization, how do I reach out to you and see if I can become a partner?
Well, I'm kind of the point person. So Nancy at scenicjacks.org. I could put it in my email's also at the bottom of the website. We would be happy to give a presentation to your, the board or the organization that you're with. It's not a super formal process, if you want to join, and it's not a financial commitment. We really are looking at the reach that a lot of these organizations have, and that that has spoken a lot when you represent many organizations, and then the communication value of being able to spread out your message through other organizations, and get people engaged. And you're obviously a very active, a lot of these organizations are used to being advocates, and that helps a lot, because we need to educate people as to how they can make their voices heard in time for these decisions. I think that's sometimes the problem is the timing of how do you do something. If it's too late in the process, then the decision's already made. So yeah, just contact me and we can set up. If you know other organizations who just want to hear the presentation, we're happy to spend time doing that, and talk to you guys and get questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both so much for your time today and for sharing this. I think it was really a great presentation, And I hope that you will hear from many other groups after this to join your coalition. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our president, Linnell Philman, who I know has some announcements to make.
I do. I just want to echo Deb's comments there. Thank you very much. I know some of us had heard either or both of you speak in other forums, but I can't thank you enough for the changes that you continue to make here in our community. And it's not just topical. I mean, this really does reach out to the different communities that use these spaces. And I'm just so thankful to hear you say that you are listening to the input of the public. Too often, you know, we have a habit of going into places and tell people what they need. So this is great to actually listen to the citizens and the residents that will use this space, as well as inviting other people into it. So thank you very much. This was very informative. Just a couple of quick league announcements. First off, welcome everyone into 2021. So we hope that this is a very fruitful and productive year. The legislative committee meetings start next week. And then we get ready for everything building up to the session, which starts March 3rd, which is going to be intriguing considering the budget limitations that everyone will be dealing with as a result of the pandemic. But all good news starting out. We're going to be participating in the Martin Luther King parade, Martin Luther King Jr. parade on January 18th. Where did I go to August? January 18th, and Diane Main is going to be heading that up for us. So we're going to be walking socially distanced. A lot of us still have our sashes that we'll be wearing, and we also have ordered some masks. If you're interested in that, Diane can put you in touch with the right person. Also, our education committee has been stood up. Susan Ertker is our education chair, so welcome, Susan. She is going to be holding her first committee meeting on January 22nd at noon. If you are interested in just hearing what the committee will be working on, or possibly joining the committee, you can reach out to Susan, and you can do that via our website. I'll share that at the end. Also, Mary McLaughlin, they're doing a lot of great work already on what was known as Medicaid expansion before, but the pandemic has really made even more people aware of what happens when our healthcare is tied to employment, and employment has disappeared for so many in the state. So Mary will be holding her healthcare committee meeting on January 18th at 6 p.m. For those that are interested, we'll put you in touch with Mary. On January 23rd, which is a Saturday, we are going to be holding a action and study event, and that will be for league members only. But we're going to really take a look at some issues that are of concern to us at the local level. And we'll be deciding what, if any, action we want to take where we think we can make some improvements for the residents here in Duval County. Also, lobby days. Lobby days this year for the league is going to be virtual. I know that the vaccine for COVID-19 is out. It's having a slow rollout. We know that a lot of people are taking advantage of that. But just for safety, we're just going to go ahead and plan to do a virtual lobby day. So we will all be able to participate still, but we will not be traveling to Tallahassee. We will not be staying in a hotel. And even though we won't have a great time together in person, we will find a way to connect to each other and really make sure that our voices are heard in our state's capital. So that will be April 8th. We'll be doing that. More will come out in our newsletter. Also, our first meeting of the restoration rights for returning citizens was actually held on December 22nd. Our next one will be January 26th. I see a couple of our lawyer members who are on the event with us today here. Juanita Powell, I'm glad to see your face. I know that you've been recovering from surgery, so I'm thankful that you're doing well. But for anyone who is interested in helping with restoration of voting rights for returning citizens, you can reach out to us, and we'll make sure that you have the meeting information. So Amendment 4, it had some struggles with SB 7066 as it was implemented. But the league has not given up on making sure that those people who have prior felony convictions, that if they are eligible to vote, that we get them registered to vote. And if they're not eligible, to make sure that we help them troubleshoot those things that are standing in their way so that we can return them to full citizenship status. So just real quick, our website is lwvjacksonvilleleague.org. Our email address is lwvjaxfc@gmail.com. or you can message us on our Facebook page and we will be sure to get back to you. But it's going to be an exciting year. It's going to be a challenging year. But we know that we're up for the challenges that we face here in the state of Florida and across the nation. And we really look forward to our members and anyone else who is interested in joining the work of the league, so that we can make this a better democracy for us all. So thank you all for joining us today. I know you could have been in a lot of places today, but this was the place to be, to get informed, get connected, and let's start doing some work to support these two great organizations. So again, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.